They ever nailed down some really important digital forensic evidence, and that is the GPS locations of Brian Hooker and the stupidity of Brian Hooker. They knew that there was some lore, they knew there was some weirdness with the boat, but they didn't, from my sources, really believe that this was anything more than just a paid job like they do every day.
The open waters of the Atlantic Ocean do not care about narratives, and they do not keep secrets forever when federal forensic investigators decide to intervene. Approximately 40 miles off the coastline of Florida, an elite team from the United States Coast Guard Investigative Service executed a high-stakes maritime interception that completely upended what the public thought they knew about the disappearance of Lynette Hooker. A 46-foot luxury sailing vessel named Soulmate was cutting through international waters, making its way steadily northward back toward the United States under the command of 2 hired transport captains. These maritime professionals had no idea that their standard relocation job was actually the focal point of a massive, multi-jurisdictional criminal probe, or that multiple layers of federal surveillance had been tracking the ship's coordinates from the moment its hull cleared Bahamian territorial waters. When the Coast Guard cutter Winslow Greaser moved in to intercept, the boarding was calculated, professional, and entirely legal, shifting the battleground of this case away from foreign jurisdictions and straight into the hands of United States federal prosecutors. Yellow crime scene tape now lines the perimeter of the vessel at a secure military dock, and the image of federal agents carrying dozens of evidence bags out of Brian Hooker's floating home tells us everything we need to know about where this case is headed. This changes everything we thought we knew because for nearly 6 weeks, the official narrative focused almost entirely on a tragic accident involving an 8-foot dinghy in the Sea of Abaco. If the alleged incident occurred entirely within a tiny motorized rubber boat, ask yourself why federal law enforcement just turned a massive 46-foot yacht into a meticulously processed crime scene. Think about that for a moment as we look at the sheer scale of what is unfolding at Coast Guard Station Fort Pierce, where investigative assets have established an outdoor cataloging station directly on the concrete dock. Agents are not just looking for obvious signs of foul play, they are extracting internal computer systems, dismantling marine navigation consoles, and preparing the entire vessel to be moved into a specialized forensic warehouse where every square inch can be scanned for microscopic traces of biological data. This is where things get serious because the legal framework required to seize a privately owned vessel in international waters under the Fourth Amendment is extraordinarily high, meaning federal judges were presented with probable cause that went far beyond mere suspicion or rumor. The 2 delivery captains, completely blindsided by the flashing lights and armed boarding teams, were quickly cleared of any involvement when records confirmed they were simply hired to relocate the boat because the registered owner was unable or unwilling to make the journey himself. Their genuine shock upon learning that the vessel was tied to a major international missing person investigation underscores the level of compartmentalization and strategic patience the Coast Guard used to pull this off. They did not move on the ship while it sat anchored in Marsh Harbor, choosing instead to wait for the exact geographical moment when the vessel entered U.S. legal authority, a move that guarantees any evidence pulled from the hull will be perfectly defensible in an American court of law. Stay with me because this is where it gets complicated, and it requires us to step directly into the chilling discrepancies between what Brian Hooker told rescuers and what the digital universe actually recorded. According to the timeline Brian originally provided to the Royal Bahamas Police Force, he and his 55-year-old wife Lynette left a marina in Hope Town around 7:30 on the night of April 4th, navigating the pitch-black water back toward their primary anchorage. Brian claimed that unpredictable seas and intense winds caused Lynette to suddenly bounce off the back of the small dinghy, plunging into the dark currents of the Sea of Abaco. In his initial statements, he described a desperate but failed rescue attempt where he tossed an orange safety ring toward her, only to realize that she had been wearing the engine's safety lanyard around her wrist. When she fell, the lanyard popped out of the console, instantly killing the dinghy's motor and leaving Brian entirely without propulsion, forcing him to drift helplessly through the night until he eventually paddled ashore in Marsh Harbor at 4 a.m. It sounds like a tragic sequence of maritime equipment failure, a perfect storm of bad luck and natural elements that swallowed a seasoned sailor without a trace. But this is exactly where the narrative completely disintegrates under the weight of modern digital forensics, because investigators have managed to recover the smartwatches Brian Hooker was wearing that night, and the data stored inside those silicon chips tells a profoundly different story. Modern GPS-enabled wearable devices do not guess, they do not misremember, and they do not alter their logs to match a cover story. The forensic data pulled from a dark green smartwatch that Brian kept in his possession reveals that during the exact hours he claimed to be floating at the mercy of the wind and current, the dinghy was actually navigating deliberately between 2 highly specific coordinates in the open water. Even more damning, The movement pattern recorded at those exact spots was not linear or erratic like a drifting vessel. It was distinctly circular, indicating a boat that had dropped an anchor or was intentionally holding position over a fixed point while swinging around its axis. The water depth at those precise coordinates has been verified by federal sources to be roughly 15 feet, a detail that completely contradicts early media reports of deep ocean drops and provides a highly localized target for recovery teams. A boat without an engine cannot choose to stop in the middle of a channel, it cannot choose to circle in a perfect radius for extended periods, and it certainly cannot navigate under manual power against the known currents of the night to reach a second, separate location before heading toward the shore. Ask yourself why that detail matters, and look at how the physical data directly challenges the humanity of the original story. I want to turn this over to you for a moment because your perspective on this structural contradiction is vital. Do you believe a seasoned boater could genuinely mistake a controlled, multi-stop motorized journey for a 6-hour helpless drift? Or are we looking at a deliberate attempt to manipulate the physical geography of a crime scene? Take a second to drop your thoughts and theories in the comments section below, because looking at how these pieces fit together is exactly how we get closer to the truth. The digital trail left behind on that April night expands even further when we look at the sudden appearance of a prominent white watch that Brian began wearing in public almost immediately after his release from initial questioning in the Bahamas. Investigators quickly realized they were looking at a classic shell game of physical items, where the clean white watch with absolutely no recorded activity from the night of the disappearance was meant to be the focus of visual scrutiny, while the darker green watch containing the actual tracking data remained hidden in plain sight. This calculated miscalculation shows an incredible underestimation of federal forensic capabilities, as agents successfully obtained and analyzed both timepieces alongside wireless carrier telecommunications records that map out a secondary grid of cell tower pings. As the digital evidence continues to tighten around the true timeline of events, the focus of the investigation has shifted from a desperate search on the surface of the water to a highly targeted, impending recovery operation beneath it. The Bahamian government has officially granted permission for elite United States Coast Guard dive teams to enter their territorial waters, equipped with the exact coordinates pulled from the smartwatch logs, searching for what lies 15 feet below. They are not just looking for an answer to where Lynette went, they are looking for specific heavy items from the 46-foot yacht that vanished from the ship's inventory at the exact same time, creating a dark hypothesis that investigators are currently working to prove or disprove with every single dive. To understand the full significance of this script and track the developments of this breaking true crime story as federal forensic teams dismantle the official narrative, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video so that Lynette Hooker's family continues to receive the public attention their search for justice deserves. In the following part, we will explore the missing equipment from the sailboat, the bizarre logistics of the 2 landing points in Marsh Harbor, and the emotional reality of the DNA samples collected from Lynette's family. Let me know when you are ready for part 2. For a deeper look into the early stages of this investigation and the initial reactions from local maritime authorities, you can watch this detailed timeline of Lynette Hooker's disappearance in the Bahamas, which provides essential geographical context on the Abaco Islands. When federal investigators step onto the teak deck of a seized vessel, they do not just look for what is there, they look for what has been deliberately removed. As the forensic processing of the 46-foot sailboat Soulmate intensifies under the blinding floodlights of the Florida recovery docks, a quiet panic has begun to set in within the defense camp because the ship's meticulous physical inventory is suddenly missing 3 critical items. Forensic accountants and marine investigators cross-referencing past social media photographs, maintenance logs, and customs declarations have confirmed the absolute disappearance of a heavy auxiliary spare engine that was permanently bolted to the deck, Lynette Hooker's distinct pink diving weight belt, and her specialized buoyancy compensation device. In the world of maritime law enforcement, these are not just pieces of missing recreation gear. They represent an enormous, dense accumulation of ballast weight that could easily be used to keep a physical object permanently submerged at the bottom of a channel. This changes everything we thought we knew because the presence of missing scuba ballast directly intersects with the 15-foot deep circular coordinates recovered from Brian Hooker's hidden green smartwatch. Investigators are currently operating under a chilling hypothesis that someone on board the Soulmate systematically utilized the heavy steel of the backup engine and the heavy lead blocks of the diving gear to ensure that whatever went into the Sea of Abaco on that April night would never naturally float back to the surface. Think about that for a moment as we transition away from the missing hardware on the main ship and look directly at the bizarre, erratic logistics of Brian Hooker's arrival on the shores of Marsh Harbor the morning after his wife vanished. According to his official story, he was completely at the mercy of the natural elements, drifting blindly through the black water with a dead engine before finally washing ashore at a single beaching point where he scrambled to find help. But local telecommunications pings and geographic tracking data have shattered this narrative by revealing a highly irregular two-stage landing sequence, showing that the small rubber dinghy actually touched land at one isolated location before mysteriously appearing much later at a secondary, completely separate spot down the coast. Wind and current move a disabled vessel in a single continuous line. They do not drop a boat off on a beach, allow it to sit stationary, and then magically pick it back up to deposit it at a completely different residential coordinate hours later. This is where things get serious. Because the overland terrain between that initial calculated touchdown point and the residential neighborhood where Brian eventually knocked on doors has been described by Bahamian rescue teams as a completely impassable nightmare of dense tropical vegetation, razor-sharp mangroves, and unstable limestone water barriers. For an exhausted, traumatized 54-year-old man who had supposedly spent 6 agonizing hours fighting the open ocean without food or water, navigating that physical barrier on foot would be an absolute athletic impossibility, meaning the boat had to have been navigated to the second location under its own secret propulsion. Stay with me because this is where it gets complicated, and it centers on a piece of evidence that Brian Hooker completely volunteered himself in a series of frantic text messages sent to a coordinator with the Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue Squad. In those messages, which were intended to illustrate his innocence and show the miraculous nature of his survival, Brian pointed out that an orange floating safety ring he had thrown to his drowning wife had somehow managed to wash ashore in Marsh Harbor at almost the exact same location and time that he did. He explicitly described the occurrence as a remarkable coincidence, noting that he and the empty rescue ring had apparently traveled across miles of open, shifting ocean water while maintaining a distance of roughly 100 yards from each other throughout the entire night. But maritime salvage experts and oceanographers look at that volunteer detail with deep, profound suspicion, because different objects with different surface areas, weights, and wind resistance do not drift identically through complex tidal currents over a 6-hour period. Investigators are currently examining a far more calculated theory, that the orange safety ring was not a failed rescue tool at all, but was actually dropped into the water intentionally as a reconnaissance guide to map out exactly where the nighttime currents would carry a drifting object. If someone wanted to create a flawless cover story of a helpless drift, they could simply drop a highly visible marker, track its trajectory, and then use a silent, low-profile electric trolling motor to navigate their own vessel directly behind it, ensuring they washed ashore at the exact location the natural current dictated. I want to pause here and ask for your direct input on this bizarre geographic and mechanical anomaly, because your insight into human behavior under pressure is incredibly important to this developing case. Do you believe a husband surviving a genuine maritime tragedy would focus on documenting the highly scientific, parallel drifting patterns of his rescue equipment? Or does this feel like a hyper-detailed cover story that was over-engineered to fool seasoned coastal investigators? Take a moment to write your thoughts, theories, and perspectives in the comments below, because analyzing these structural contradictions is exactly how we pull the truth out of the dark. While the public debates these theories, the emotional heart of this tragedy was laid bare just days ago when federal agents traveled directly to the home of Lynette's immediate family to execute a somber, definitive legal procedure. Investigators systematically collected family reference DNA samples from Lynette's grieving mother Darlene, her father Dan, and her adult daughter Carly Aylesworth, entering their genetic profiles into a high-priority federal missing persons database. Providing a DNA swab to a federal agent is a devastatingly profound act for a family because it represents the silent, heartbreaking acceptance that your loved one is no longer walking this earth, and that your only remaining hope is to identify whatever human remains the ocean eventually gives back. Immediately after the cheek swabs were completed, the 3 generations of Lynette's family stood shoulder to shoulder in their living room and took a single photograph together, a poignant image of total family unity in the face of absolute horror that signals to the world that they will not remain passive bystanders while the legal system grinds slowly forward. The collection of this reference DNA is the final jigsaw piece required for the upcoming joint underwater operation, meaning that the moment Coast Guard divers locate any anomalies at the bottom of those 15-foot circular coordinates, a definitive forensic identification can be made within 48 hours. As the physical and digital evidence continues to mount, the terrifying reality of Lynette's personal life before the trip has begun to leak into the public domain through a series of disturbing, recovered text messages she sent to a close friend. In the months leading up to the ill-fated Bahamian vacation, Lynette explicitly detailed the fractured, volatile nature of her 25-year relationship with Brian, using words that now read like a haunting prophecy from beyond the grave. She described a marriage that was rocky at best, plagued by escalating screaming matches and dark behavioral shifts that became infinitely worse whenever alcohol was introduced into their isolated environment aboard the boat. In one final chilling text message that has now been secured by federal prosecutors, Lynette flatly told her confidant that she was becoming genuinely terrified of her husband's unpredictable temper, writing the devastating phrase that now hangs over this entire investigation: "I simply cannot be out there alone on the water with him anymore." To stay completely up to date as federal prosecutors prepare their formal case and dive teams descend into the Sea of Abaco, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a breaking development in this ongoing search for truth. For a deeper understanding of the family's perspective and to see the raw emotion surrounding these new forensic updates, you can watch this coverage featuring Lynette Hooker's mother breaking her silence, which explores what Brian told the family and the gaping holes left in his timeline. The psychological chess match inside a federal interrogation room often leaves a paper trail far more revealing than a suspect ever intends. Following his rescue from the shores of Marsh Harbor, Brian Hooker sat before seasoned maritime investigators and attempted to sketch out a rough visual timeline of his movements on the night his wife vanished into the dark waters of the Sea of Abaco. Using a simple pad of paper, he hand-drew a series of maps meant to illustrate the exact path of his helpless drift, tracing an erratic line from the anchorage near Hope Town straight to the secondary landing site. But when forensic behavioral analysts cross-referenced these hand-drawn diagrams with the cold, unyielding spatial data pulled from his green smartwatch, they discovered an absolute spatial nightmare filled with glaring physical contradictions. The locations where Brian hand-drew moments of total panic and manual paddling directly collided with coordinates where his watch showed the boat was holding a perfect, calculated circular radius over 15 feet of water. This changes everything we thought we knew, because a person operating under the blinding fog of genuine trauma does not accidentally invent alternative geography, nor do they accidentally sketch out paths that perfectly bypass the actual coordinates recorded by their own wearable devices. Think about that for a moment as we look at the sudden explosive development involving the physical security infrastructure of the 46-foot sailing vessel Soulmate itself. When federal agents began dismantling the interior panels of the yacht at Coast Guard Station Fort Pierce, they uncovered a hidden network of commercial-grade infrared security cameras that Brian had installed throughout the main cabin and the rear deck area. For weeks, the defense camp maintained that these cameras were completely inactive on the night of April 4th, claiming a localized power surge had fried the system's main recording drive before they ever set sail for the Bahamas. But forensic data recovery specialists specializing in marine electronics successfully bypassed the damaged exterior ports, extracting a series of corrupted system logs that proved the internal lenses were actively drawing power and capturing high-definition frames during the exact hours Lynette disappeared. The theory federal prosecutors are now examining is that someone deliberately tried to erase or physically damage the central server hub immediately after the incident, completely unaware that modern solid-state memory drives retain magnetic remnants of visual data long after manual deletion command is executed. Stay with me, because this is where it gets complicated, and it leads us directly to the doorstep of Lynette's adult daughter, Carly Aylesworth, who shattered weeks of public silence by launching a fierce, uncompromising media campaign against her stepfather's official narrative. Standing before local news cameras, Carly openly detailed the chilling behavioral shifts she witnessed in Brian during the immediate aftermath of the tragedy, describing a man who seemed far more preoccupied with protecting his physical assets than locating his missing wife. According to Carly, while volunteer dive teams and local fishermen were out braving treacherous channel currents to scan the surface for any sign of Lynette, Brian was busy making frantic phone calls to marine insurance adjusters and maritime transport companies to secure the relocation of the Soulmate back to American shores. This agonizing lack of traditional grief has completely polarized the local boating community, as Carly openly begged public officials to treat her mother's disappearance not as a tragic open-water accident, but as a high-stakes, calculated corporate exit strategy executed by a man who believed the ocean could swallow his secrets whole. I want to pause here and bring you directly into this heavy emotional and forensic divide, because your perspective on this family dynamic is incredibly valuable to the search for justice. Do you believe Brian's immediate focus on moving the yacht reflects a practical, compartmentalized response to a ruined life? Or does it align with Carly's belief that the boat was being rushed out of the Bahamas to escape local forensic scrutiny? Take a second to write your thoughts, perspectives, and theories in the comments section below, because your engagement keeps this investigation alive in the public consciousness and ensures that Lynette's name is never forgotten. While the online community debates these behavioral markers, federal investigators have quietly expanded their digital net, securing a massive cache of encrypted cellular data through a series of high-priority search warrants served to major wireless telecommunications providers across 2 countries. The incoming telecommunications grid has revealed an intense, late-night flurry of outbound text messages and data transmissions originating from Brian's secondary mobile phone during the exact window of time he claimed to be floating helplessly in a disabled dinghy with no working electronics. These digital pings did not bounce off the standard cell towers near Marsh Harbor. They connected with an isolated long-range cellular array situated on a completely different island ridge, proving that his device had a clear, unobstructed line of sight to open waters that a low-profile drifting rubber boat could never physically achieve. Investigators are now tracking a highly complex theory that the small dinghy was actually operating alongside a secondary, unmonitored chase vessel that night, acting as a logistical shadow to ensure that the entire operation could be completed without leaving a single visible trace on the surface of the water. As these pieces continue to lock into place, the legal pressure on Brian Hooker is reaching an absolute boiling point, turning the upcoming federal grand jury proceedings into one of the most critical turning points in recent maritime history. To ensure you are right there alongside us as the final pieces of this digital puzzle are laid bare and the dive teams prepare their final descent, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and share this video across your social platforms so the truth remains louder than the cover stories. The financial architecture of a crime often provides the blueprint for the actions that follow, revealing a level of cold calculation that a spontaneous accident can never explain. Days before the 46-foot luxury sailing vessel Soulmate cleared its final port of call in the United States, forensic accountants embedded within the federal task force uncovered an intense, highly unusual pattern of financial activity tied directly to Brian Hooker's corporate accounts. A series of rapid max-limit cash withdrawals and wire transfers totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars systematically drained the couple's shared domestic liquid assets, moving the funds into an intricate network of offshore banking entities located in the Caribbean. This changes everything we thought we knew because these massive capital movements were executed under the radar during the exact week Lynette was sending terrified text messages to her closest friends about her safety on the water. Investigators are now tracking a definitive financial motive, pointing out that the timing of these withdrawals completely shatters the image of a spontaneous maritime tragedy, suggesting instead that the entire Bahamian vacation may have been used as a geographical cover for a highly structured, permanent relocation of wealth. Think about that for a moment as we look directly at the long-awaited results of the high-resolution side-scan sonar operations conducted by elite United States Coast Guard dive teams within the Sea of Abaco. Utilizing military-grade underwater autonomous vehicles, recovery teams meticulously map the topography of the ocean floor at the exact 15-foot-deep circular coordinates extracted from Brian's hidden green smartwatch. The sonar scans have officially detected multiple high-density structural anomalies resting in the silt, displaying a geometric footprint that perfectly matches the physical dimensions of the missing auxiliary spare engine and the metallic frames of the scuba buoyancy compensation device. This is where things get serious because the presence of these heavy, non-floating items resting precisely beneath the paths where the dinghy recorded its deliberate circular loops provides federal prosecutors with a physical anchor they need to tie the digital forensic data to an active concealment strategy. Divers are currently working against treacherous, shifting undercurrents to physically clear the sediment from these targets, knowing that whatever is strapped to those heavy iron castings will provide the ultimate, undeniable answer to what happened on that dark April night. Stay with me because this is where it gets complicated, and it brings us to the absolute edge of a major constitutional showdown within the American federal court system. As the grand jury prepares to convene in the coming days, Brian Hooker's high-powered defense attorneys have launched a massive preemptive strike, filing an emergency motion to suppress the smartwatch GPS data, claiming that the Coast Guard's high seas interdiction of the Soulmate constituted an illegal search and seizure. They are arguing passionately that federal agents overstepped their constitutional boundaries by monitoring the ship in international waters without a localized warrant, attempting to throw out the very digital footprints that connect their client to the underwater anomalies. But federal prosecutors remain entirely unfazed, confidently preparing a mountain of evidence that proves the maritime interception was executed under strict emergency missing person protocols, ensuring that every byte of tracking data and every piece of physical evidence pulled from the hull remains completely unassailable in a court of law. I want to open this final critical development up to you as we watch the legal walls close in on this entire operation, because your voice and your analysis are vital to how this story unfolds. Do you believe the discovery of the missing boat hardware at the exact smartwatch coordinates is enough to secure a conviction without a direct physical recovery of Lynette? Or will the defense's constitutional challenge create enough reasonable doubt to shield Brian from justice? Take a final moment to drop your detailed theories, perspectives, and insights in the comments section below, because the public scrutiny we generate here ensures that high-profile maritime cases are never allowed to fade into bureaucratic obscurity. As we await the formal announcement of charges from the federal grand jury, the devastating weight of this entire investigation continues to rest heavily on the shoulders of Lynette Hooker's family, who are forced to live in a state of suspended agony while the machinery of justice grinds slowly forward. This case remains entirely unresolved, An active and bleeding wound for a family that refuses to let the public forget that a vibrant mother, daughter, and friend went out into the quiet blue waters of the Bahamas and never came home. No arrests have been finalized, no formal indictments have been unsealed, and the ultimate truth of what lies beneath the surface of the Sea of Abaco still depends on the final, dangerous work of the dive teams clearing the ocean floor. If you believe that Lynette Hooker's story deserves absolute national attention and that her family's fight for answers must be supported, please take a moment to share this video across your networks, subscribe to the channel for immediate breaking updates, and leave your thoughts below as we continue to track this investigation until the truth is fully exposed.